Rich, today we're talking with somebody who's been personally coaching me, Kellan Fluckiger. He's a transformational coach, mentor, and has written 18 best-selling books. I can't wait to dive into this episode, not only for our audience, but also so you can meet somebody who's been coaching me along my journey.
So much wisdom that he shared in this episode between exploring how to love yourself and cultivating intuition. And wow, was his story just gripping about what changed for him 15 years ago and the difference he's been able to make in other people's lives since.
A lot of good quotes in this one. The one that stuck with me is truth carries its own power. And there's so many more learnings that we get from Kellan, his passion, his love, just a very dynamic episode here for us to share with you guys. Here's Kellan. Today's episode is being brought to you by Financial Wing. Are your company's financials keeping you up at night? We all know that today's small to medium-sized businesses often overlook the fundamentals of accounting and financial operations. Our friends at Financial Wing can help with everything from bookkeeping, monthly closing and reporting, budget planning, and much, much more. Financial Wing's reliable and professional approach will quickly build your trust and turn your finances into an asset versus a liability. Go to financialwing.com/EU for your free 30-minute consultation and see what they can do for you. Kellan, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. Excited to have you on with Rich and I today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the good you're adding to the world. I love being in the presence of people who've made choices to use their gifts and talents to serve and add good to the world. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And you've added a lot of good to the world yourself. And I'm getting a little taste of that as you're coaching me on a specific assignment that we're working on. But before we get into any of that kind of stuff, can you give our audience maybe a quick view? Let's start with the present. What are you doing today for entrepreneurs and business leaders across the globe? What is your business doing today?
Right now, as soon as we're done with this, actually a little bit later this afternoon, I'm going to do my daily live. My daily live is called Road to 50 Million. And I put it on LinkedIn, YouTube, and 5 Facebook places. Road to 50 Million is a project I started on October 14th. And the purpose of that, October 14th, is when my year starts, not January 1st. My goal this year is to help 50 million people to discover and serve with their gifts. And so I'm doing a daily live talking about that. And today, the name of the show is Entrepreneurs, because I think entrepreneurs are going to save the world. They're going to save the economy. They are where the engine, the innovation, the capability, the determination, and the strength come from, because it is those few people who, as a percentage few, who say, you know what, I have a gift, I have an idea, I have a talent, and I want to use it not just to make money. And there's plenty that just do the I want to make money thing. But really, the ones that are satisfied and make a big impact are the ones that say, I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact as well as an income. I want to change something. So right now, my goal is only one thing. I only do one thing, first breath to last, every day, all day long. And that is figure out how to reach more of my 50 million people to discover and to make a choice to serve with their gifts. And many of them, that means making a business and creating income and all that other, but it's really focused on saying yes to the intuition and leaning into that truth.
Well, I'm leaning in right now, as I'm sure Rich is. I could tell you that Rich, his mission is to impact others in his life. I know I have similar missions myself with entrepreneurs, so we really connect to this. But walk me through just for a second. I understand 50 million, big number, but when you say help them discover and serve with their gifts, can you be a little bit more specifically about how you're doing that in your messaging?
You bet. So all of us in our lives feel nudges from time to time. We should do this. We ought to do that. We ought to try this. We shouldn't do that. Let's call those intuitions. Most of the time we ignore them. Especially the big ones or scary ones or difficult ones. We make up reasons why it's not okay, not the right time, I can't, won't, it won't work, etc., etc. Those are connections to our intuition or higher self or whatever you want to call it. and they connect to the gifts that we have. Now, the gifts that you have, sometimes people think of art and music and those kinds of things, but I'm talking about innovation. I'm talking about the gift of encouragement, which is why I like being in the coaching business so much. I think of that as a people encouragement business. It might be a product development. It might be a new way to serve someone with a SaaS product, or it might be in anything. The choice to do the things that you feel both drawn to and capable of doing well, better than others, easier than others, those are gifts that you and I were given. And we were given those gifts to serve each other. And when we live that way, we make money, we make a difference, and it's a whole lot of fun. So the methods that I'm using right now is I have a podcast also called Your Ultimate Life. It's called Your Ultimate Life because it's about how to build a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy by serving with your gifts. No surprise. I have a YouTube channel called Ultimate Life Formula, and it's processes to do that. I now have a television program that's going to launch later this month that's on a brand new television network from a lady who started 17 other networks. The first season is 10 episodes called Creatives Save the World. And it's all about those choices, whether it's hard goods, soft skills, or anything else, to make a difference instead of just making money, because that comes as a byproduct. So between the TV, the YouTube, the podcast, the books, I write books, obviously, and I wrote a book about writing books and all that stuff. So those are the methods that I use. And also I have coaching clients, group coaching and private coaching and stuff like that. But the big methods to reach a lot are those other avenues, channels.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. And certainly you can see, Rich, why I was so excited to get Kellan on with this, because I know you and I talk a lot about, how can we make a bigger impact to the people that are around us? Kellan, I want to dive a little bit deeper into all of that stuff you just talked about. But before I do, tell us a little bit more about the Kellan story. How did you get to the point where I want to go impact 50 million people and help them serve? How did that happen?
So if you met me 15 years ago, you wouldn't recognize the person. 15 years ago, before August of 2007, and there was a very specific day and a big divine intervention that happened that day, I was a corporate climber. I had a hugely successful career in the C-suite in the United States and Canada, testified before Congress, had a contract with Her Late Majesty the Queen, et cetera, all kinds of big dog stuff. And I was empty, I was broken, I was sad, I was struggling with depression, which I had all my life, and I wasn't doing anything to do good. I was doing it to make money, which I made a lot of, but I had a miserable life. I was married and divorced 3 times. I was in and out of rehab, and addiction was a problem, and on and on and on, and I mean serious problem. At one point, it was $3,000 a week, a cocaine habit, okay, and I was making so much money that didn't matter. All of that stuff happened, and in August of 2007, there was a dramatic invitation, and I say invitation because everything that comes from the divine is always issues as an invitation. We have a choice to do it or not do it. So I had that happen in August of 2007. The story about that I'm happy to share. It'll take a minute if you want, but I'll stop there. But that happened, and after that happened, I said yes to the invitation. I walked away from the career that I was in, started all over again, and began something new. I hadn't written anything before then. For example, I didn't consider myself an author. Since then, I've written 18 books, and I've got 2 underway right now. And I have created all the stuff that I have now, and I only focus on that love and service. And yeah, I use a squishy word like love all the time because I define it in a particular way. To love someone, even in business, is to make a choice to use your resources, spiritual, physical, emotional, mental resources, to serve them. If you choose to use your resources to serve someone, lift them, bless them, then you love them. Okay, and the more you do that, the more you love them. And that includes kids and spouse and friends and customers and everything else. And when we connect to the truth of the power of that choice, then it's not a squishy word anymore. It's a true choice and a clear set of actions. So I had a completely different life. I had a divine intervention. I abruptly changed directions and had to build everything from scratch, starting in August of 2007.
I can't help but ask, and you said it may take a minute, but would love to hear about what a divine intervention is for you.
Okay. In August of 2007, I came home on a Friday night. I was at that time single again for the third time. I had 4 of my 10 children living with me, and they were all teenagers. 3 were grown up and married, 4 were with me, and 3 were with, it's embarrassing to say, but one of the exes. I was a $3,000 a week cocaine addict. I was a high functioning addict. I was making so much money, none of that mattered. And I was ready to go party for the weekend. Before I went out, I had this urge to turn on the television. Now, that doesn't sound like anything, except I didn't watch TV. I had the biggest stuff you could buy installed because that's what you buy when you make, So, but I picked up the remote and I'm like, ooh, and I didn't know how to turn it on. So I asked one of the kids, and my 16-year-old daughter, on some buttons and, threw the remote at me. Yeah, dipweed. And so it landed on a program I'd never heard of. But that's not surprising. I hadn't heard of any of them because I didn't watch TV, and it may not even be on anymore. But it was a reality TV show called Intervention. And that's a reality TV show about families who stage professional interventions for busted loved ones. The protagonist was a high ranking executive with a cocaine problem. I watched about 10 minutes and said, yeah, I'm not watching this crap, even though it was me on the screen. I turned it off and stomped around the house, did a few more things, and got ready to go out. And I had this incredible urge to turn the TV back on. So this time I knew how. So I did. And that program started over. No, I don't have a DVR. No, it isn't on the schedule. And no, it can't do that. I got it. But it did. So I thought, oh, crap. So I watched it. It went poorly. The guy screamed at his family, swore he didn't have a problem, stomped out of the meeting, and you know the drill. But it freaked me out. And so I went to bed instead of going out to party. When I went to bed, I went to hell. To hell. And what I mean by that is I went somewhere. I don't know where I was. It felt out of body. It was in a dark room. I could hear voices and see a stage. On the stage, played out scenes from my life, starting from when I was young, and I was raised in a very physically abusive environment with discipline that today would be felony child abuse, and including some sexual elements and some atrocious things, which is why I lived my whole life, depressed and isolated, because I believed everything was my fault and it wasn't good enough. And that had led me on this roller coaster of creating big success and then sabotaging it. So that was 3 relationships and this big career and then smash it, and this career and smash it. And I'd done that 3 or 4 times, and I was at the top again when this happened. Anyway, so it went through all these scenes up to and including all the suffering I had inflicted on everybody else as a drug addict and a lousy partner and a rotten dad and, all the things. And the degree of emotional suffering, we don't have language to describe. So I'll just leave it there. It was intense beyond words. After a long time, a voice said, "It is enough." I woke up and I was disoriented because the sun was shining in the window and the windows faced west. I got up and realized it was 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon. So I'd been somewhere nearly 18 hours. I got up and realized, okay, I've been invited to change. I have never talked to anyone. I have never tried to get help. I have no idea what to do, where to start, or anything else. But what I know for sure is I'm done. So I threw away $1,000 worth of stuff I had laying around, because I always did, and I quit cold turkey that day. That got me sober, but it didn't do anything at all to address how I got there, the isolation and the depression and everything else. That was the other shoe, and that fell 2 weeks later. That was Friday, that was Saturday, actually. Monday, I went back to work, even though I knew I had to just get out of the whole thing and start over. I didn't really know what to do. And in the position I had, I used to get a lot of free stuff because I made decisions that were affected some companies with billions of dollars. And so everybody wanted to be nice to Kellan. So I used to get free tickets to this and free expensive bottles of booze, like I needed that, and all kinds of, right up to the line of, yeah, that's a lot of money. Not quite, that sort of stuff. One of the things I got was a pair of tickets to see a Yo-Yo Ma concert. And if you know classical music, you know who that is. And if you don't, you don't. But in the classical world, that's ah, right. And so I thought, oh, wow, this would be a shame to waste this other ticket. So I asked in the groups of people that I managed, and I said, who likes classical music? Because I didn't have anybody to give it to. And some lady in one of the groups said, well, I do. And I said, oh, okay, cool. Have I ever given you anything before? Because I gave away stuff all the time. She said, no. I said, okay, fine. See you there. Gave her the ticket. We met at the venue. The concert was unbelievable, as it would be. And now you got to understand the date of the concert, I'm now 2 weeks stone cold sober. Halfway through the show, I had this feeling come over me, and I heard this voice that I recognized say, you need to marry this woman. And I said, you're insane. I said, I've screwed that up 3 times officially with some other awful messes in between. And I clearly don't know how to do this. Later that night, we were backstage because they were not only good seats, they were backstage passes and the reception and the whole thing, right? The voice came back and said, and you need to tell her tonight. And I thought, okay, there's a few problems with that. One, she can have me arrested for harassment. And number 2, I actually don't know if she has a relationship. I mean, this wasn't a date. This was just me giving a ticket to somebody. And you don't win those arguments. So I did. And it went about like you would have expected. Are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? But the good news was she didn't call the cops. And she didn't have a relationship. And in the next 2 weeks, she had her own set of experiences. She walked away from her career, and I quit and walked away from millions of dollars of contracts. And we walked off into the sunset together. And about a week ago, we celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. That was a divine intervention.
Wow. Are you getting teared up as you tell the story?
Every time. What I didn't tell you is her name is Joy. Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah, this is emotional every time. Because if here's how I think about it. It was an invitation. I mean, she didn't have to say yes. I didn't have to say yes. I could have done a whole bunch of other reactions. But it was an invitation. She was literally the angel that was sent to help me, part of her own soul contract, figure out how to be a person, how to tell the truth, how to have a friend, how to be a friend. I'd never learned any of that, and I'm 52 years old at this point. And so the first few years of our relationship, we had to get to know each other. I mean, like, we didn't even know each other that well from work, like, at all. And so it was literally a leap of faith driven by that same intuition that I talked about earlier, issued as an invitation of possibility. And that one was dramatic. But here's the thing. If there was ever a person who was a candidate to be left at the bottom of the canyon, I was the poster child. And what I know is that no matter where you've been, no matter what your struggles are, no matter what the challenges are, no matter anything has happened to you, it's never too late to make a choice to discover and to live into your divine opportunities. And I use that word without hesitation. Those gifts were given to us, and they were given to us to love and serve each other, and to create business, and to build entrepreneurship, and. But the main thing is to develop ourselves, our souls, because that's the way to happiness.
Thank you for that. Tell me about intuition. Shy of a TV show starting back over, which is literally miraculous, shy of losing your consciousness for 18 hours and experiencing something that's life-changing, shy of hearing a voice say you should marry this woman. Those are all miraculous things that I struggle to consider the average person has those things available. The average person, how do they find their intuition? How do they find their invitation? Where is that for them?
Thank you for asking that, because I recognize those are extraordinary. And the only reason I got them is because I had ignored the softer ones that we're going to talk about, and I needed a 2x4. Here's the truth. If you're an entrepreneur, you have cultivated the skills of business, of creation, of product development, of customer finding customers, of all that stuff. You've cultivated a skill. Maybe you cultivated a sporting skill. Maybe you cultivated some other relationship skills. I had none of those. If you want to learn to hear your intuition, you have to work on it, because intuition almost never comes as a shout. Those slaps, 2x4s, explosions that I had didn't change my life. They happened and they ended. And then you're left sitting there thinking, holy crap, what did I do? What happened? What do I do now? Yeah. And then the next morning comes and dawn shows up and you're like, did that even happen? And so learning, I don't care if you've never listened to intuition in your life, you have felt it. You have felt in your heart or your stomach or both a feeling that you should do something, that something is right, that something is wrong, that something needs fixing, that you should or shouldn't do or say this thing. Learning to cultivate that, and there is a set of activities that I help people with. You can learn to cultivate it. The divine, the unseen world, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is rooting for our success. But the purpose of this existence isn't to set things on cruise control and have fun. It is personal development. We came to grow as people. That's why there are so many challenging and difficult opportunities, because the real issue is those things happen, and they happen to everybody in different amounts at different times. The question is, what are you going to do with it? So the first step is, do you take time every morning to sit quietly with yourself and listen for intuition? You can call it meditation. You can call it prayer. Do you take time to connect with, invite, and seek those feelings? Or do you just get up, grab the phone, and do some other crap because it's handy and you're busy and you got lots to do? There's the first place to start. Meditation, the first 5 books that I wrote were a series on meditation. It's simple, 3 things. 1, slow down enough to be where you are and when you are, because our mind is so much somewhere else, somewhen else, what's coming, what's past, anywhere but here right now. So step 1 is just slow down enough to be where you are and when you are, right here, right now. Even if you start with 5 or 10 minutes. The second step is notice what is there. Because when we are so busy doing, thinking we have control and we need stuff, the universe has been unfolding for 15 billion years without our help. Nothing that we think of or calculate or imagine is going to change any of that. We are best served when we slow down and pay attention, instead of trying to control and manipulate the world. So step 2 is notice what is there. And what I mean by that is, when you slow down and you be still, you will notice thoughts and feelings in yourself that are different. They're a different color. They feel different. And you'll start to notice those things. They don't feel like the old doubts, fears, worries, excuses. They don't feel like that. So start to notice what is there. And then the third step is trust. What comes to you is truth. Those 3 steps alone, there's lots more to it, but simply making a choice. I'm going to develop the skill of intuition. Okay, let's see. The practice to do that is ABC. So that's where you start. It doesn't matter where you've been. You don't have to go to an ashram or sit in some weird pose or do anything else. You just have to choose. And some people say, oh, my thoughts are too busy. I'm too freaking. Yeah. I've heard all that. Start where you are. You can't do it wrong. And just practice. And it will come.
So it sounds like cultivating intuition starts with slowing down, paying attention to what happens next, and trusting what it is that happens next. And it's that simple, but it's also that complex in the world of all of our busy lives and even more so our busy minds. What do you find as the number one obstacle that people need to overcome to get themselves to start this practice?
Oh, if we had planned this ahead of time, I couldn't have put a better plant in the audience. The number one, I mean, your questions are perfect. The number one obstacle is you don't love yourself and you don't trust yourself. And if you doubt that, listen to the way you talk to yourself and how you judge yourself, the dialogue that goes on inside your head that you wouldn't tolerate from your best friend. The way you think about your own judgments, the way you second guess yourself. So the key to do that is to explore loving yourself. And there's a way to do that. A simple exercise I have people do to start with is just go to the mirror and look in your own eyes deeply and slowly and say, I love you. Not just once, but just sit with that. Lots of people, they'll look away. They want to change the words. They want to do some dance. I had a client that come back and tell me after a week, he said, crap, I'd rather put my hand in a meat grinder. It was so emotionally difficult for him to explore the idea of believing in his own capability, regardless of the mistakes he'd made, regardless of the angry things, this, that, and the other, or the things he'd done wrong. If the divine, the creation, the creator can love us and give us these infinite number of chances, if we want to honor that truth of being, having these gifts, then loving ourselves is the place to start. Because here's an uncomfortable truth. You can't love anyone else, your partner, your kids, or your clients, more than you love yourself. And people pretend, oh, yeah, and they go through the motions of this, that, and the other. It's nonsense. If you want true power, if you want true success, and I'll even say this because we're talking on an entrepreneur's podcast, cash in the bank, increases in sales, increases in customer acquisition, your customer service to go up, raving testimonials, and all the rest of the stuff that we're supposed to talk about as entrepreneurs. If you want that, start loving yourself and showing up as the person who loves themselves. And maybe there's a conversation to have about what that really means and how to do it.
I'd love to take you right into that because, certainly we've talked a little bit on this conversation in this podcast, Rich and I, several times over, which is taking care of yourself isn't selfish. That's the first thing you need to do. So we've had that conversation, and sometimes we know what that means. Okay, maybe you need to be healthy. You need to, spend some time on your own. You need to do things like that. But I think you're talking about a different level of loving yourself, and I'd love to hear your take on that. Because for some people, it may be looking in the mirror and ushering those words, right? For others, it may mean something different. But you gave us a really good key on, hey, if you want to cultivate your intuition, here's where you start. If you need to start loving yourself more, where do you start? I know you gave us the mirror example, but give us maybe some more examples of where you think that should, from an entrepreneurial perspective as well, if you can.
You bet. I want you to listen to and keep track of the dialogue you have inside. How do you talk to yourself? When you have conversations with yourself about what you have done, what you haven't done, whether you're behind, whether you're panicked, whether you're worried about this, and you should have done this, and that's behind, and how come, and you start, just listen to how you interact with yourself. And then I want you to imagine your children if you have them. If you interacted with your children or your employees the way you talk to yourself, would they love you for it? I don't know about everybody, but often the answer is no. What if your creator treated you the way you treat yourself? So exploring your real relationship with yourself. What do I think of myself? Everything's my fault. I did it wrong. I should have done better. It should have been sooner. This, that, and the other. That's a real powerful line of inquiry. Maybe you're a person who doesn't, who has a beautiful dialogue and are kind, demanding. I'm not saying let everything slide. I'm not pretending that. I live in the world of excellence. I live in the world of accomplishment. I live in the world of doing good and doing a lot of it. But there's a way to do it with kindness and joy. The reason I use this background here, this phoenix with all this light, people are attracted to light. We're heliotropic beings. Every plant, every animal, every amoeba will migrate across a petri dish toward a source of light. We are attracted to light. So if you intentionally spend time loving yourself in meditation, connecting to intuition, and you show up in every conversation, in every meeting, in every greeting, in every email as a person of light, a person of possibility, a person of, even if something goes wrong, okay, what's the opportunity here? Instead of, oh, this freaking sucks. What are we going to do? That change right there is attractive. It rallies support. It creates loyalty. It lets people see who you are. And so when I work with people about business, the first thing I want to understand is, who are you being in the world? How are you showing up? If someone described you, the energy that is in and around you, what would they say? And is that attractive? Are you attractive with that energy and conversation and demeanor? There's a study. Dr. Martin Seligman wrote a book called Learned Optimism. And we talk about optimism and pessimism, and we make excuses for pessimists by calling them realists. So he did a 20-year study, the biggest one that's ever been done, about people who choose optimism and choose pessimism. Now, optimism isn't some stupid, oh, it's all okay, Pollyanna kind of thing. Optimism is simply a choice to believe there is a solution. Pessimism, or quote, realism, is a choice to believe it probably won't work, or if it does, it'll be really freaking hard. Now, here was the results of his study. People who chose to learn to be optimistic made more money than the other people in the study that were the same education, same. They did better athletically. He did a bunch of athletic studies. So similarly talented people did better on the field, in the boardroom, in the bedroom, in the bank account, and everywhere, just because they chose an optimistic outlook on life. And so his concluding statement was, pessimism may be the mark of sophistication, but it is a costly one.
Wow.
And he also said people live 5 or 7 years less. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I could see that. You just connected a huge dot too for me when you started bringing in sports. I mean, the amount of professional athletes today and professional teams that are incorporating mindset performance in their professional coaching ranks, because it's all between the ears, right? What you're telling yourself as you're practicing, as you're playing, the language you're using when you're waiting for your next hockey shift or whatever the game is that you're playing, what you're talking to yourself about and how you're talking to yourself is a huge indicator how you're going to go out there and perform. And that's no different than entrepreneurs. How you're talking to yourself, how you're treating yourself. I really love the people are attracted to light, and we all know that people, they don't leave companies, they leave bosses, or they leave leaders, or they leave entrepreneurs, right? But if you have that light of optimism, and I love the Learned Optimism book, I want to look that one up. It's all the messaging. It's messaging of what you're telling yourself. I want to hit another nerve for me, which is, there's that quote unquote gut feeling, which I think is very similar potentially to intuition, whereas many times as an entrepreneur, you just have it in your gut that you should probably let this employee go, or you should probably hire this employee, or you should probably, go for it here or not do something over here. Entrepreneurs make a lot of decisions, hundreds and hundreds of decisions in a year. Is there a difference between gut feeling and intuition? And I guess the second part of that question is, when you have a gut feeling, even if it's unsubstantiated with facts or research or whatever, should you just trust it? Because the times I haven't trusted my gut feeling, I've regretted it. But then it's not always scientifically backed.
So let's pretend for a moment that the gut feeling
Hmm.
or the third eye, if you're doing chakras and it's in what, I don't care how you call it. It is your connection to something larger than yourself. Dr. David Hawkins wrote a book called Power versus Force and another book called Letting Go. And he talked about all knowledge exists in the universe already. And it is our ability to tune into that. So if you had to say to someone whether to trust a raft of scientific demonstrated evidence or something that they were really convinced came from a larger source, I don't have a millisecond hesitation which way I go. I trust the larger source, period. I didn't used to be that way. So the person you see now, I trusted all the other stuff before and I made a crap load of money and had a horrible life. You can make a crap load of money and not do dumb things like I did. I realize that. But I can't tell you how many people I even talk to and work with who've made a lot of money and they have big success and they go, there's just something more. I just really want to. That languaging, that feeling is the divine yearning we have to make a difference, to make an impact. And whether it's before you make money, after you make money, while you make money, money is a byproduct of living into light and truth. It is a byproduct of exercising the gifts that you have well. It is not the goal. It is simply an exchange medium, a collection of energy. And the problem we have is we've created a religion around money and people worship at the altar of that. And that leads to all kinds of misery that we don't need to catalog.
Yeah. Okay, Kellan, I want to switch us in a different zone here for a second because
Okay.
there's a bunch of other things to talk about, but this has been phenomenal already. You've written 18 books. Which one are you the most proud of and why?
I guess probably the one that was scariest was Tightrope of Depression. My journey from darkness, despair, and death to light, love, and life. After I wrote the book, 5 books on meditation, and writing a book about something over there is one thing. Writing a book where you explore your own journey and you are vulnerable and you talk about depression and addiction and all the kinds of stuff that I went through. And I had really resentful rebellion from family members because I talked about the abuse that happened as growing up, and I didn't write it as I didn't write any of that. I just talked about my experience and how it left me.
Mm.
So this one, after I got it done, I waited a year before I published it because I was scared of it. And also, when I wrote it, I decided I wanted to do some music. So I've owned a recording studio forever, and I got 82 songs on Spotify. If somebody looks up my name, I decided to write an album of music telling stories from that book. And so I did, and it's called The Name of the Black. And so I'm proud of that because it also spawned that. And when I thought this was going to be the only one, when this got done, I realized it only went up to this time and I was just getting started. So then I wrote the sequel called Down from the Gallows in keeping with the rope theme. And there will be a third book, a concluding book on the trilogy, which will be out this year, probably summertime or something. And they each have an album of music and so forth. So this is probably the one that was the hardest to write and to release. I think the one that I just finished and released about 6 months ago is called Forgiveness, A Journey of Courage to a Place of Freedom and Power, talks about how to delete all the excess baggage that we carry about the meaning of past events and past situations and stuff that is just a hindrance to our life because we have stories about what somebody did or didn't do in the past or what we did or didn't do to others, and we either carry guilt or anger, resentment or something. And both of those things are needless baggage that give past events negative power in the present so that we can't be our best selves today.
Yeah, love that. Thanks for sharing all of that. And I mentioned to you, Rich, before, but I was introduced to Kellan from one of our former guests, Jeff Cohen, who wrote Count Honorable. And it was in a conversation with Jeff post recording our podcast where I developed a friendship with him, where he informed me that he worked with Kellan on the production of his book, Count Honorable. And he said, "Would you like to talk with Kellan?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to talk to him, but I'm not so sure I'm ready to write a book yet. I'm not really sure that, I have the content yet or whatnot." And I had a call with Kellan, and That was months ago, and have since read Kellan's book called Story Arc, which really assisted me with the process of digesting my story and what my gift or service is and how I can impact others. And so I've been working with Kellan on the production, which I announced this a couple weeks ago. The kind of my goal to have my first book released in 2023, and that's a lot of through the coaching of Kellan. So Kellan, if you don't mind, can you share maybe with the audience and with Rich a little bit of that story arc process and how you assist people with a gift and how they can get that gift into a book form?
Yeah, 85% of adults in North America think they should write a book. What that means isn't, some might be just, sort of vanity. I'm cool. People should know about me. But most of them have a feeling that their set of experiences and how they have met and worked through or overcome challenges is a story worth telling because it will help someone else. Almost always people are thinking, if I had known this before, whatever, it would have helped me, right? And so even though 85% of people think, oh, well, I probably should write a book, I have a story, something, less than 1% do. And the reason is because they have second self-love. I don't really have anything to say. I'd throw a party and nobody'd come. I'd write a book and nobody will read it. I don't really know how. Oh, it's too hard. Oh, I don't have time. And they have a list of things, the same as you guys will have heard about people not starting a business. So I don't have time. It's not the right time. Da, 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 right? Don't know how. All the same things. So here's what I do with Story Arc. Whatever it is that you're trying to teach someone, they don't know it right now. You have a set of experiences that you believe would be valuable for someone if they understood them and internalized the learnings that you have. Okay. Then I use a rainbow. It's in the form of a journey over the rainbow. The ideal person that would really benefit from your experiences is in a certain place right now, a place of doubt, a place of uncertainty, of not knowing what to do, how to do it, or believing in themselves. That's where they are right now, and because they don't have what you could teach them. The other end of the rainbow is the pot of gold, which is they do have a full understanding and explanation of the things that you have learned, and they understand how to use them and what to do with them, and they can use, and so they've gone from scared to hopeful. They've gone from I don't know what to do to I know exactly where to start and what to do and how to get help. And that journey across the rainbow from whatever those characteristics are, and when I start with somebody, I just say, well, the perfect person to understand your story or read your book or take your course or whatever, what are their characteristics? And doubt and worry and not knowing always get in that list. Doesn't matter what the topic is. It's the the state of internal sensibility about their own ability and their skill and whatever. And then I say, well, what's the state of person if they knew all this? What's the pot of gold? And then we explore how to get them from here to there. And that's what the story arc is. And I usually create it in the form of a 3-act play. And the 3-act play is you've identified where they're starting, what they lack, what they want, and you've identified the pot of gold. Before they're going to accept you as a guide from this state of not knowing and fear to a state of success, they have to know you. They have to understand something about you. You have to trust you. And so that's the first part. The act 1 of the book is, how do I introduce myself, my stories, my experience to them in a way that resonates with them? So part 1 is exploring how to tell your own developmental story, not in a look at me, I'm cool way, but just to introduce, to create some rapport with the reader. And you know who the reader is because you listed all their characteristics. So the part 1 is exploring that. Part 2 of the book, and then by the end of part 1, you want to think about, I use in the book Story Arc a cab ride. And all of us have taken cab rides, and if we're busy and distracted, we get in the back of the cab and we're sitting there like this, hoping the cabbie isn't talkative and we're busy on the phone or whatever. It's like, yeah, leave me alone. I've got my own stuff to do. So what your goal is with introducing yourself to the person is, think about a cab ride, to move your passenger, you're the cabbie, right? From this position to leaning forward with their elbow on the passenger seat, engaged in conversation. That motion is the first part of the book. You're trying to connect with them in a way that they believe, they trust you. And you need to do that before you start teaching them a bunch of crap. Because if you start teaching people first, it goes through the filter of, who are you? You don't understand me. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe it'll work, or maybe it worked for you, but not for me. And to avoid all that, you don't teach them anything until you've created some connection. And that's part one. Part two is then you teach them whatever you have to teach them. You organize it in a framework, you figure out what your lessons are, what the guts of your doctrine, your principles, and I have people create a framework, pyramids, Venn diagrams, circles, it doesn't matter. Some way to represent the things that they have learned. And you don't start teaching that until you've created rapport, so that when you teach them, it goes in instead of up against the barrier of, I don't know you, I don't know if you know what you're talking about anyway. So that's part two. And then part three is an opportunity for you to give examples from your own life, from lives of people you may have already helped, or you can use borrowed authority when you know people have used things like what you teach and created success. But you use part three to reinforce the ideas that you have presented as your doctrine in part two, so that then they have the greatest opportunity to see themselves. Because at the end of part two, even if they love you in part one and they believe everything you teach in part two, there is one remaining question. And that remaining question is, yeah, that's all good, but will it work for me? And that's what you tell some stories in part three about successes you know from others, successes you've had in your own life. If you have created a business to help others, then you can use client stories. You can use borrowed authority if you need to from other people in the world that have done things that sound a lot like what you teach and what they've created. But the point is to give the reader the greatest opportunity to see themselves in your story. So that is the 3-act play of the story arc, to help take your experiences, create connection, teach your doctrine, and then increase the likelihood of success. And it works for a book, it works for a program, it works for a workshop, it works for a keynote, because it just helps someone do that. And that's what we do in the story arc workshop.
In act one of that is creating connection. What recommendations do you have for people who want to be intentional about creating connection?
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean being intentional? Tell me more about that.
Someone who says, I want to create connection with this audience, not that it happens, quote, naturally or unintentionally, or they just stumble into a good conversation and building rapport. They intentionally go, I want to create connection with someone. How do they go about doing that?
There are 3 keys to quick rapport. Number 1 is shared experience. Number 2 is shared goal. Number 3 is shared worldview. So if you tell experiences from your own life, I mean, you've already created the list of characteristics of the person who's most likely to pick up your book based on the title or whatever, right? They want something. And you've already specified an audience. I want to have a connection with this audience. Okay, fine. Then your need is to say, what is that audience feeling? What are they missing? What are they looking for? What's missing? And you list those characteristics. You need to create a sense of shared experience. If you don't have any experiences that connect with the deficiencies that you believe your audience have, then you shouldn't write that book. Period. Because all it is some pundit talking about a thing over there. There's a billion people talking about a thing over there. Resonance is created when I look at you and I believe you understand me. It's like the saying in sales, when you can describe a person's problem better than they can, they assume you know the solution. Okay, and that level of connection and understanding only comes from a shared experience. So number one is a shared experience. You create that. I'll give you an example. I was on a plane ride. I was sitting next to a rather sullen person who obviously didn't want to engage in conversation, and I was feeling like I wanted to. So I rudely asked him what he did or where he was going or something, and he mumbled some stuff. And after a couple of questions, he said he was in real estate. He showed me a commercial real estate card and blah, blah, blah. And then he said something about a recording studio, that one of his buildings had a recording studio where he did this or that. Well, I have owned a recording studio for 40 years. And immediately we had a shared experience. And all of a sudden, for the rest of the flight, it was a very interesting connection and everything else. And I learned that he was the dad of Nora Rockefeller, who is the videographer for Tom McDonald, who is the rapper who does all kinds of stuff. He's the current day Eminem. He's amazing. You should watch some of his stuff if you don't know it. I don't like that kind of music particularly, but Tom McDonald's is really good. Nora Rockefeller was a mall rat in West Edmonton Mall. Had run away from home and lived in the mall, and mall rats are legend in that place because that mall is so big you could get lost in there for the rest of your life. All the secret passageways and everything else. So anyway, he's her dad, and we learned about studios and all kinds of stuff. And what was it? It was just the fact that he said something about a recording studio. So shared experience. The second thing is shared goal. So that might be completely people from different sides of town or anything else that come together in the PTA because they're trying to earn money for a band uniform project or for a trip or something. All of a sudden, that shared goal creates a connection that they can start having conversations that in a different context they wouldn't even have. Right? They tell about this and that, and because why? Because they automatically assume things about each other because they have this shared goal. Okay, and a shared worldview is like politics or religion or something about hard work or just some kind of a set of beliefs. Shared worldview. If you see and understand that someone shares that with you, you can create rapport just like that. So your goal in telling stories is first and foremost, what stories do you have? What is in your life that makes you think you have something that will really help someone that's struggling with XYZ, whatever your list is? And people don't understand that all the time. And that's why we do the story arc. Because then when I'm coaching them, I walk them through and ask all these questions and I yank crap out of them and I make them make lists and do the homework and everything else. And John knows what I'm talking about. So it's a process of discovering, do you really want to do it? Why are you picking this book? Why do you want to talk to these people, et cetera, and helping people figure out what's going on.
Yeah, if I summarize that on shared experience, goal, or worldview into identifying statements, it is somebody saying, I've been there too. Mm-hmm. I want that too. Or I believe that too. Mm-hmm. That there's something about that experience that creates connection, that creates rapport, that creates trust. And the example you gave on the plane is a brilliant example of how quickly there was an assumption of trust just from having I've been there too example of the recording studio. And that's great. John started us going down the lane of story arc. I'd like to take a quick dive down the lane of, is your book called Forgiveness?
Yes, Forgiveness, a journey of courage to a place of freedom and power.
So you were very vulnerable, and you have been throughout this entire conversation, which I appreciate. You had mentioned in your childhood that you'd been abused physically and sexually. Have you forgiven your abusers?
100%. I carry no anger, bitterness, or judgment toward anyone for anything, including myself. And that's an absolute factual statement. It's hard won, but it's true.
I looked up some quick stats. It's 35% of women and 28% of men have experienced abuse. So it's a vast audience of people. I did not look up, and I don't know how they would take stats on forgiveness of abusers, but I imagine those stats would be incredibly low. What is the journey that an individual who has an abuser, who they hold something against, what does that journey look like to go from it continues to abuse them because they resurrect those feelings and it impacts them today, to forgiveness and being able to let go and having a new life independent of that abuse. What is that journey? How can our audience who resonates and maybe has had abuse themselves, how do they do that?
So the first thing, the very, 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 very first thing is to just choose. I'm going to learn how to do this. It's a scary thing. It can be a hard thing. It can be an angry thing. How dare you? They should have been skinned, flayed alive, and burned at the stake, and all the kinds of feelings you might feel if you had been abused. Or the other side of that coin is if you have made a lot of mistakes as a drug addict and all the other things I had horrific shame and guilt about all the mistakes that I made. So it's both the same. The first thing is to say, look, as long, and I'm going to say this really slow, as long as I continue to allow that event to have power over me in the present, I can't live my best life without blame or fault or anything else. As long as I allow that to continue to drag me down, either side of that coin, shame or anger, as long as I continue to allow that, I can't live my best life. I can't live my ultimate life. I can't add as much good to the world. I'm still carrying those rocks. That's just an understanding. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's true. Okay, the next step is I'm going to get rid of those rocks. Now, the most liberating truth is getting rid of those rocks is an individual exercise. It does not depend on whether your abuser was punished, caught, paid up, apologized, or did anything. They're on their own journey, and it is not our responsibility to make sure or to exact or to demand some form of retribution, justice, apology, or anything else. That realization alone is so liberating. There is justice in the universe. Call it karma, call it God, call it whatever you want. I don't have to do that. Oh, I think they deserve. Okay, maybe they do, but it's not mine to do. Okay, cool. If you get past that, then there's the matter of the limp. The limp is, I tell a story about a dog. I had a dog in 2007, came to me as part of this divine intervention, came in November, a month or two after this other stuff happened. And I'd never had a dog before, and it was a puppy, and it was a very nice purebred Australian Shepherd that my son and his girlfriend had, and then they broke up and didn't know where to put it, so I ended up with a dog. And so I didn't know how to take care of a dog, and the puppy was young, and I was too rambunctious on New Year's Eve, 2007 to 2008. And the dog bumped into a speaker stand, and the speaker fell off the stand and landed on the dog's foot, broke all the metatarsals at midnight on New Year's Eve. And so I'm searching for an emergency veterinarian, not knowing anything about anything. Found one, had surgery, did all that they could possibly do. And when they gave him back to us, they said, yeah, we did everything we can, but he may have a limp later in life. Don't know if we can fix this. Okay. I felt horrible. I blamed myself. Oh, my heck, I've ruined this dog's life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The dog wasn't having any of it. The dog had a limp when it got cold or he worked too much for the rest of his life. And the dog didn't give a damn. Okay. I have a limp. I struggled with depression without getting any help or treatment for 35 years. Even though I started when I was 52 trying to do this stuff, I have a limp. I have things that trigger me. I have stuff that goes on. Part of it is not about, partly about the abuse and a lot about the guilt and shame because I have 10 kids and some of them still don't talk to me. And so there's lots of opportunity there. And as long as I lament the limp, I can't love and serve people. So whether you choose to forgive your abuser or forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made, letting that go, when there's a process that's take some time to explain, but choosing to do the process and work until you let it go. Now, I tried and I can't do that crap. Blah, 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 blah. Choosing to do the work until you get to the top of the mountain. That's why the subtitle is A Journey of Courage to a Place of Freedom and Power. So either side of that coin, it is a choice to no longer allow the energetic leftovers, the limps of the past, regardless of the side of the coin they came from, to have power in the present. So that is the most important, so that you can love and serve with your gifts. As an entrepreneur, as a product creator, as a dad, as a father, husband, partner, person in the world. It's like the phoenix behind me. How do you choose to show up in your life?
Powerful. I've got a question for you that, opposed to recap that, and I took some great notes. I am stunned by the quality of your voice. And like, I'll tell you, Kellan, I could listen to you read the dictionary, and it would be the most compelling reading of the dictionary I may ever have ears on. How do you use your voice in such a compelling, magnetic way that entrepreneurs can take a note from?
We all have gifts and talents. When I was young, I was terrified. I lived in fear because of the abuse and physical things. Music was a refuge. I learned to speak. And over the years, I've learned, because you're not the first person to tell me that, you're the 1,000th, and I've learned to love it. And I've made a choice. I'm going to use this gift that I have, the gift of dramatics, the gift of inflection, the gift of sound, to tell the truth in every syllable, to love because I can. And so all those things that I say, they're true. And I will give you a secret that's worth $1 billion right here, right now, for your entrepreneurs. Truth carries its own power. What I mean by that is, we say things and we want people to believe them. Often if someone says, oh yeah, I'll be there, you know what it means is, if I remember, if I still feel like it, if I don't get a better offer, and if you don't piss me off between now and then. If they really mean it, they'll say, no, I swear, I promise, and then add a bunch of other crap. Because we live in a world of not truth. When you make a choice to tell the truth all the time, you don't need any extra words, because somehow, in ways I can't even explain, truth carries power. Period. And so when I speak, I make sure every syllable is truth. Not because I'm cool, not because of anything, but because I want it to penetrate. I want it to carry the power of truth.
Rich, do you see why I have engaged Kellan to help me write my first book?
Absolutely.
The power, Kellan, that I think you have, I know you have, is that power of vulnerability, passion, creativity, voice, love, all those things that I've enjoyed working with you on as I process what I hope to be a gift for entrepreneurs in the writing of my first book. And I appreciate all the work that you've been helping me with. I appreciate you coming on, having a conversation with Rich today, and sharing your story with us in a lot more depth than I even knew about after spending a good amount of time with you. So thank you very much for that, and the gift that you shared with us here today.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you for sharing your gifts, multiple of them, with us and our audience, Kellan. Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. Delighted. And if I can do anything else for you, let me know. Bless both of you, John. I absolutely know your book will be amazing. And the more love and light that you put in there, the more powerful it will be.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
John, Kellan's take on connection, I think, is exactly what I've been missing from what I know about the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Where in How to Win Friends and Influence People, it specifically says, talk to a man about himself and he'll listen for hours. Well, if you take that literally, which at times maybe I have, and it's asking a lot of questions and showing genuine interest. And where's the place that there's something shared in that other than just finding someone else interesting? And I think Kellan brought that to life here. For that connection, there needs to be some shared experience, a shared goal, or a shared worldview. One of those. I think the mistake a lot of us make in rapport building is we'll ask somebody some questions, and every time somebody says something, we feel like we have to interject with what we think. Yep. And there's this ping pong match. So that doesn't work. It also doesn't work, this extreme talk to a man about himself and he'll listen for hours. The middle ground is ask enough questions about somebody else to find something where you have a shared experience, goal, or worldview. And Kellan really connected those dots for me today.
Yeah, there's a difference between having, some conversational rapport and somebody walking away and saying, well, Rich is a nice guy. He learned a lot about me and asked me a lot of questions about myself. That's nice. But if you want to have a deep connection with somebody, I love your point, right? Try and find that area of a shared experience or a common goal or even a worldview. And I'll tell you what, between those three, chances are whoever you're talking to, you can find it. I mean, if it's an or, right, you'll be able to find that. But I think where it comes down, when I listen to Kellan talk about not only the connection, but the intuition and everything that's there, it's how can you be your best self? I mean, even at the end, when he was talking about forgiveness, if I'm going to be my best self, I have to let that go or I can never be my best self. And that's a deep thing and very difficult for people who have had trauma in their lives or different things to forgive. For me, there's several moments in this episode that were very touching to him, very visually. If you're not watching the episode but you're listening, but it was also very touching to us to hear him and his passion.
Yes, big time. And his passion specifically about helping people discover and serve with their gifts. To me, that just seems really noble, probably because it identifies with something along the lines of what we want to do also. And one of the things that I learned from this conversation around intuition and being able to pick up on where is the truth in ourselves is Kellan went through, slow down enough to be where you are, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes. And then notice what's there. What is showing up in terms of thoughts and feelings? And the last thing is trust that what comes to you is truth. There is the other side of that seesaw, though, because he also says that we want to take inventory of what our self-talk is. And often we would not talk to a friend or an employee that way, and they wouldn't love you if you talk to them that way. So there's a little bit of a trick shot there that what comes into you is truth, yes, but also he brought up the learned optimism.
Yeah, learned optimism.
So there's this balance of, yes, it's truth, but if it's really excessively harsh, to make a choice to believe that there's a solution was how he described optimism. So there was just so much brilliance that could be applied in this podcast. I'm definitely going to listen to it again.